Hi, Christy.
Hello,
Hi,
how are you?
everyone. Good, and you?
Good. Can everyone hear us? If you can just write in the chat if you can hear us.
I think it might be fine.
Hi.
Hi,
Hi,
Ali.
Ali.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. So I told Christy already that the internet might be a little bit bad tonight because the weather's not too good in Beirut. So I hope it's not going to be a problem.
Great.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're
hopefully.
having, yeah, hopefully as well. We're having comments that they can hear us as well. That's perfect. Thank you, everyone. Great. Thank you for joining us, Ali. And hi, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Great. Christy, do you want to start?
Yes, sure. So hi everyone. For those who don't know us still, we're مغتربين مجتمعين. We're a network of the Lebanese diaspora that was founded in 2018. We work towards a civil, secular, and independent Lebanon. Tonight we have Ali with us. Tonight's talk is a part of a series that we've been doing about the situation of marginalized communities in Lebanon and how they are affected by the current crisis. So today's talk is going to be about how the current crisis is affecting prisoners and the prison system in Lebanon, as well as addressing myths and stereotypes about prisoners.
Yes, thank you. And I guess, Ali, do you want to introduce yourself to everyone?
Okay, so I'll keep it short, but my name's Ali Baroudi. I have I mainly have a background in business and in trade and everything. And for a period of my life, which is the topic of discussion tonight, I spent 5 years almost in Rumia and other prisons around Lebanon. I did a little Barmi. So I got to have a taste of what it's like to be in the Lebanese prison system. I got a taste of what it's like to be in prison in general. But I think any Lebanese system has its own unique flavor. So the Lebanese prison system has its own unique flavor. Um, and I maybe throughout the talk we can talk about some things that I got to see in common between the Lebanese prison system and the Lebanese system as a whole. And what I saw in the bigger picture in the country. So that's pretty much what I'd like to start with.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're really honored to have you with us and to share your experience with us. So for everyone who's interested in the talk and having any questions, please do not hesitate to also to submit any questions in the comment during the talk, and we'll get to it whenever we can. So it's meant to be interactive. And perhaps I can start already with the first question. So when we talk in general about prisons and prisoners in Lebanon, what does the term mean, and what does it currently cover? What types of prisoners do we currently have, and for what reasons? And maybe you could also use that question as an opportunity to talk about your personal experience and reasons for being there.
Okay. So I mean, like any other country in the world, our prison systems are filled with all kinds of criminals. Um, So you have things from drug cases to murders to robberies to anything like nasib, ihtiyal. These days, yani, because of increased poverty in Lebanon, you can only imagine that people are trying to do anything they can to make money. So you have people that are getting arrested for stealing bags of bread, people that are getting arrested for stealing some gas. All kinds of things can happen in a country like Lebanon, but in general, like any other prison system, you find everything. Hala, the thing to keep in mind is that in Lebanon, all cases are usually kept together. So it's not like they separate different degrees of crimes. So you end up going to prison with people that have consumed drugs, sold drugs, written forged checks, forged money, killed people, raped people. They're all sitting together in the same building. So you can also imagine the conversations that happen between these people when they have nothing else to do than to talk to each other. You also have Islamic movements that were arrested throughout the last 15 years in Lebanon. They were also placed together in the same building. And you have different kinds of cases that have happened in Lebanon, and they're in the prison systems. My personal experience was in the drug case. So I had to do with marijuana in a country like Lebanon, which actually grows its own marijuana. It actually has marijuana as a very illegal thing, and they penalize it very heavily. So consuming cannabis with friends, for example, consuming cannabis and giving out to a friend, selling it to a friend, even if it's a very small quantity, it still can get you up to 5 years or even more in prison, depending on the situation. So that was my personal experience. But in a nutshell, those are the kinds of prisoners that exist in our system. And if you want to ask what the term prisoner or kharij حبوسي, as Lebanese people would say, it has a very negative connotation, because in the first place, the way Lebanon looks at the prison system is like a cage. So we usually send people there when we don't want to deal with them anymore. You know, they're a burden on our society. They're a headache. We don't want to care of them, so we'll throw them in there. It's not a rehabilitation center where we send them there so that they can improve and so that they can improve the society. So that's how Lebanese people look at that. And that's why when people get out of prison, they're usually labeled, and it's a taboo in Lebanon, and usually a subject that people don't even bring to the table. They don't talk about it. Although a lot of people in this country have been to prison or a jail cell at one point in their life for any reason, it is an extreme taboo. And I'm a person that I like to break these taboos. I don't really care for them. And I'm really glad that you guys are taking this chance as well, because I think people really need to hear this kind of conversation, and they need to understand that it's okay. And if we talk about it more, maybe we can actually improve the outcome of what's happening in there.
Thank you, Ali. Yes, so the purpose of this talk mainly is to like break the taboos in general as well, particularly in Lebanon. And you mentioned as well that it's a very loaded and taboo subject. So it is controversial. I mean, it is, you have people asking as well, like, so how are we supposed to be punishing people as well who do harm? But someone mentioned in the comment that let's not forget the innocent people. And as you said, it's like a makhluta. It's like everyone is together and treated in a different way and in the same way. And what I find interesting as well is how easy it is in Lebanon to get imprisoned, but how difficult it is to imprison those who are really in power, basically. And this is what the point of the talk is to make, is that it is a controversial topic, but we forget as well who are the real criminals in all this and how ironic the situation is. Sorry, you wanted to comment before I continue?
No, I mean
Okay.
that's the fun thing, like بهيدا البلد, the people that run the system, the politicians, the people that blew up the country, the people that got us to where we are today, they're never called to check. No one ever brings them to court, even if they're wanted. I mean, we have some politicians right now that are wanted with warrants for their arrest, and they don't go to court. So you can forget that. The prison system in Lebanon is a very different system. It's just a cage. We need to see it like that. We need to see that it's a cage that usually only unfortunate people get to, because if you have a wasta in this country, if you have a way to get out of it, you can kill someone in broad daylight and never go to court. So that's what Lebanon is like. Prisons are just for unfortunate people, I'd say.
Yeah, so you also have undocumented migrants as well, and we have people who are really in dire situations. People in the comment section have mentioned that they wanted to talk in Arabic. I think, Christy, we had discussions as well that we would do this series as well, covering all the topics we covered fully in Arabic. So the point was to have one in English and one in Arabic. So just before we continue, this is why we're doing it in English now, but we do have plans in the future to redo all the series as well in Arabic to make it accessible to a broad audience. And yes, so that was mainly my comments. And just to add on to what you said, in public policy, I think there's ideology that it's the problem with the judicial system in general and the prisons, and it doesn't tackle the roots of the issues, which is the government and the access to basic needs and services. There wouldn't be prisons if the government would be functioning the way it should be functioning. So it's all flawed, and it's part of the abolitionist movements where we want to abolish prisons and to do a more like, to reform the root cause of the issues as well. Which is why I think people don't understand why sometimes we talk about it as if it's not controversial, or as if there's no issue as well in general, if that makes sense. Christy, do you want to jump to the second question?
Yes, sure. So the second question is, what is the current situation of prisoners right now in the context of the situation, the financial and political situation in Lebanon? And what is their situation in terms of their access to basic rights and services? And is everyone, like you've already answered this question, but maybe we can go a bit more into details with it. Is everyone in these prisons have committed the same crimes? Is there a different way of treatment depending on what crimes they have committed?
Okay, so first of all, no, there's no difference in treatment based on your crime. Like I said, when people end up getting to prison, like Rumi, for example, you find all of the different cases sitting together. So you could be sharing a room with an Islamic terrorist, a person that murdered somebody, and a drug dealer, all in one room together, and there's no difference in how they're treated. The difference in how you're treated in prison depends on two things. One, your political networking. So who are you related to? You might be able to get better treatment from the guards. You might be able to get a better room. You might be able to get some special treatment. The other thing that gets you ahead in prison, as any other country in the world, is how much money do you have? So the more money you have, the more you can buy amenities, you know? Just think of it like being in a hotel and you're paying extra. So you get access to many different things. You can get things to be sped up. Like, for example, if you want to move from one building to the next, if you want to get a telephone into the building, it's all about bribes in there. So it's about demand and supply. How much are you willing to pay to get what you want? That's the first thing to keep in mind. But I'm sure you guys have all seen prison movies and you've seen how these things work. So there's nothing really different about that. What I could tell you is how these things happen, but you've probably seen them in movies. The other thing to keep in mind is the fact that we all know that Lebanon is collapsing. So when you have a country like Lebanon collapsing, you can only imagine that the microcosm, which is the prison system, is collapsing even harder. Because to begin with, in prison, you have this overall feeling of lack of free will, depression, anxiety, tension. So prisoners are usually already in a very bad mental state. Now, when you add on top of that, them knowing that their families are doing really bad outside, economically, financially, emotionally, and they still have to come and visit them, and they still have to go to court, and with COVID, courts are being cancelled and postponed, and already before all of this drama, the situation was terrible. Sometimes you'd spend years in prison before you'd even get a court date, depending on your cases, depending on what you're in there for. So the first thing is that prisoners spend a very long time in that tension. There's nothing helping them deal with it. The second thing is economically, they cannot afford life anymore. In prison, you either eat your food through the prison food. You're not forced to, it's an option. Or you can pay for your own food, and your parents, your family, someone can bring it for you from outside. So one thing to know is that about 1 year ago, the ISF removed meat from the prisoners' food. In an attempt to cut expenses, they decided we'll just not feed them meat and chicken and stuff. So they mainly rely on vegetables, beans, lentils, things like that. That's the food that comes now in prison. It was horrible when I was there, so I can imagine it's even worse now. The second thing is that you can eat food from your parents and your family that bring it for you from outside. So in 2014, just to give you some context, to know how bad the situation is right now, in 2014, the Minister of Interior at that point, Nuhad al-Mashnu, decided to clean Rumye. It was his Clean Rumye campaign. And he went into Rumye with the entire army, I think. And I was there at that point, so I got to see it firsthand, and it was something you'd only see in a movie. It was a Hollywood movie for 1 week. And they cleaned the entire prison, they dealt with everything, and one of the first rules that they made was there was no more food to come from outside, because prisoners were bringing drugs in their food, they were bringing different types of things in their food. So what they decided was no more food to come from outside. And they kept that rule till around 1 year ago, because the situation got so bad that people couldn't afford to buy from the prison supermarket, because most of the goods are imported, and so like our supermarkets outside. So they actually had to go back to the old way and tell people, just bring your own food from home. That's how bad it is. Yani people have to cook their own food at home and bring it to their children in prison so that they can eat. Because the prisoners now only get 1 meal per day, and there's no protein in it even. It's just some carbohydrates to keep them full. Apart from that, everything from their medical situation, which has always been horrible, they get maybe 3 or 4 hours of doctors per day. Usually every day there's one kind of doctor. So one day it's a dentist, one day it's a heart doctor, a cardiovascular, the other day it's just a general practitioner. There's different kinds of doctors, but they usually come for 3 or 4 hours per day. And there's 5,000 prisoners. That's the estimated number, like 4,000 something in Rumye. So how many people can you check? You can't check many. So usually prisoners don't get medical attention until the situation gets really bad. Add on top of that, now you have COVID. COVID is killing people in there. Although they're saying that there aren't many COVID cases in prison, I don't believe them. I just believe that they're not checking properly. They're probably not conducting enough PCR tests to know who has COVID, because we all know that you don't have to show symptoms if you have COVID. And then that's the general idea of what it's like in there. Their water is horrible. The living conditions are horrible. There's no, and just to give you a simple idea, in prisons in Lebanon, the government or the ISF, because we are usually under the captivity of the ISF, they're the ones that manage us. So they don't offer us any cleaning products. So they don't give you any shampoo, any soap. They don't give you any cleaning products for the floor, for your room, for anything. So the prisoners actually have to collect their own money and have to buy those things. So you'd think that going to prison, those things are usually given to you because you're not allowed to bring them in from outside. You shouldn't be buying them yourself. But no, in this country, you have to get them yourself. If you don't, you'll end up getting some sort of a skin disease. You'll end up catching something. It's a horrible situation in there. Imagine being in the dirtiest bathroom you've ever been in your life. You know those public bathrooms that you walk into sometimes and they're disgusting? That's what the entire building looks like, smells like, and is like. And you have to do the best you can to survive that. Keep your space clean, keep your bed clean, keep yourself clean. And I used to actually manage the tax system in prison. We used to collect cigarettes from each other, the entire building. We would collect packets of cigarettes, and we would use those packets of cigarettes to pay prisoners to clean the building. So we would hire them, we would give them jobs to clean the building, throw away the garbage, make sure the building is clean, and we would pay them in cigarettes. And I just want to give you a general idea of what it's like in there. The idea is just like the rest of the country. In Lebanon, the government doesn't give us the shampoo. The government doesn't give us the soap. It doesn't give us the water. It doesn't give us the medicine. It doesn't give us anything, right? And the only difference is that in Lebanon, in the country, Lebanese people don't work together to make an improvement. In prison, we work together because we had to. That's the difference. We were forced to work together because it was us against the government. It was very clear, regardless of the sect, religion, background, it didn't matter. And there you were an inmate. That's all that mattered. It's us against the government that's trying to oppress us all the time and treat us like garbage.
Thank you so much, Ali, for this very poignant. Sorry, Christy.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you, is it the same in all the prisons in Lebanon, or are there like better prisons?
Like in it, some situations are better because in Lebanon you have central prisons and then you have small prisons that are usually in very rural areas, يعني بالضيعة or somewhere like that. You usually have small prisons. Usually the smaller prisons are, يعني if you are from that ضيعة, it's better for you to go to that prison because usually someone you know is a guard there, your family is closer to you. It's a smaller prison, so you usually have less amounts of prisoners, yani usually 100, 200 people, not thousands. But in general, the situation is the same everywhere. Yani, look, if you're driving your car around Lebanon, regardless what neighborhood you're driving to, there's no kahraba, there's no roads, it's the same. The infrastructure in the prison system is the same. But some, yani, again, if you go to a smaller prison, the bribe is cheaper. That would, I think, sum it up. Yani, if you're paying a guard in some daya, you're probably paying him $50. If you're paying him for something in Rumi, you're paying him a few $100s to do that. So that's, I think, the biggest difference, apart from the fact that maybe it's closer to your family or smaller, less crowded.
Okay.
Someone as well asked in the comment section, what does ISF stand for? And basically you mentioned like you're ruled by the ISF. It's the Internal Security Forces. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that a little bit.
They're the Darak, basically.
Yeah.
And the fact that they manage the prison.
Yeah, I mean, if you have any comments on that as well.
Yeah, look, honestly, the thing is, in many countries in the world, prisons are still managed by the internal security forces and one of their branches or something like that. I'm not. It's not about whether I'm with or against the ISF managing them. What I'm against is how the prisoners are being managed. So one of the most important things that should happen, if we're going to start now talking about reform, I mean, I think talked a lot about the problems, but how do we start fixing all of that? One of the first things is you need to educate the guards, because these guards are usually very young people. They're in their 20s. Most of the guards that were there when I was there were all younger than me. Sometimes even the officers that used to be managing the building, they would be the highest ranking officer. They would still be younger than me, like 22, 24 years old. They're very young. They're very amateur. And the thing is that they're in a situation where they need to manage people that are very tense, very angry, and sometimes uncontrollable. Yani psychologically, these people are ticking time bombs. It's just you're waiting for the bomb to tick. So these people, the ISF or whoever else is going to manage, they need to be people that are equipped with the right procedures, the right way of dealing with. How do you deal with someone that's having a nervous breakdown? How do you deal with someone that might commit suicide? How do you deal with gangs in prison? How do you deal with bullying? How do you deal with rape? How do you deal with these things? So the guards need to be very equipped to deal with these sensitive situations. In Lebanon, usually the guards, they deal with it by beating. So they bring their sticks, they come inside, they beat everyone. And again, another similarity, you see the same thing when the ISF comes down to the street to beat protesters. It's the same brutality. So they are not empathetic. They don't really care about the prisoner. They just care about getting their paycheck at the end of the month. So the first thing is we need to educate the guards. The second layer is, if we want to move the management to another department, who do we move it to? Do we move it to the judiciary? Do we give it to the Ministry of Justice? Do they manage it? Do we create another department that's specifically managing them with maybe NGOs and civil society members? I don't know. I'm not the expert in that field. But what I can tell you is that we definitely need to develop more empathetic organizations and departments that deal with these situations, and work faster with the judiciary to get them out. Because one of the biggest problems that prisoners face is a very slow justice system. So you spend years in prison, and then maybe you're even proven innocent. You don't get the time back. No one gives you anything back for the time that's lost. So we need to find a way to make it faster and better. The other issue, apart from, you know, equipping the guards and finding out the department, is what do we do with the prisoners? Because I remember when I was there, one of the worst things about being in prison is the time goes by really slow. So your short term is really slow. Like every day would pass by so slow. But then maybe a year would pass by and you'd look and you'd say, wow, how did a year go by? I didn't feel that. So one thing that I would say is that time goes by really slow for prisoners, and we need to give them things to make them enjoy their time or use their time more productively. And there's two things you can do with that. You can either teach them, give them an education, or you can give them skills. And those skills can be jobs, and those jobs can be used for our economy, regardless of what it could be. It could be woodwork, it could be mechanics, it could be teaching them skills like painting and plumbing, and I don't know. But I know that if they're spending their time being equipped and learning, it's a lot more productive than what they're doing right now, which is just killing time. That's all they do. That's all prisoners do. They kill time until the time is finished, and then they're released without any reform, and even worse, without any guidance when they go back outside. So that's hell part two, by the way. Part one is when you're lost in prison. Part two is when you're set free and now you're lost outside.
There are no rehabilitation programs, right?
There's no official rehabilitation programs. You know, it's no government-funded rehabilitation programs. There's a few NGOs that work with prisoners. There's a few organizations that try to do things. I'm not going to sit and say that they're bad or not good, because in Lebanon, people now don't like NGOs much. But what I can tell you is that they're not doing enough. They're not doing enough. Some of them teach people some classes, like let's say English, Arabic, you know, languages. They don't really teach people jobs. They don't teach people emotional intelligence. They don't teach people ethics. They don't teach people how to integrate into society again. And I don't, you know, the thing is, in Lebanon, look at the country, right? We don't have ethics in this country to begin with. We don't have emotional intelligence to begin with. So who's going to teach it to the prisoners? Lebanese people? I'm not generalizing. I'm just saying that, you know, we see this everywhere in the country. So who's going to teach it to the people in prison? That's another problem that we have. But in general, those are the things that prisoners need to learn. You know, like the rest of the country should be learning them. In prison, if we taught these people some of these things, we could go a very, very long way. Because there's one thing that I know personally that a lot of Lebanese people don't know. If they have not spent time in prison, they don't know this. And anyone that's been in a prison ever in their life in any country will agree with me. The people that you meet in prison are brilliant people. They're very smart people, but they use their energy, they use their brilliance in illegal matters. So if you want to talk about someone that can organize a drug ring, or that's a good manager if he succeeded or she succeeded. What about someone that is very good at opening locks? So if you lose your car keys or you lose your house keys, usually you need someone that knows how to open the lock. What I'm trying to say is that people are very smart in there, but they're not guided. They're very lost in life. Usually most of them come from very underprivileged backgrounds. So they don't have much to look forward to in life. Yani, I'm not blaming society for their misfortunes, but what I'm saying is if society really cared about improving the situation, society has to be much more proactive and understanding about it rather than judgmental and just, you know, just saying, this is a prisoner, I don't care about them, let's shun them in society and never talk about them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, there were lots of other comments as well in I'm just trying to gather all of them. So yeah, I mean, based on what you said and on the questions, in public policy, I fundamentally believe that the society is basically a reflection of the state, and if the state is dysfunctional, then the society as a whole is also on many level suffering from it. So we're talking about multidimensional poverty. So of course, the prisoners and all the other marginalized communities are going to set aside. If we want rehabilitation methods, we also have to have also independent judiciary. We also have to have a normal system that functions, but we don't have any of those. So for me, rehabilitation is something so idealistic that we also need to have, you know, proper courts dealing with everything, and we don't have any of those. And currently, it's on the burden of the burden is on the people to educate and to raise awareness and to do something, because we are all doing that at the moment because we don't have any state taking care of us. And you describe it perfectly as well. It happens in the prisons. People are just basically themselves kind of ruling the prison in a way, and taking care of everything. You're paying with cigarettes and all these things. So it's a bit of a sad situation. And as much as we would want all these rehabilitation and ideal things, we also have to tackle the root of the issue, which is the absence of government and its complete lack of competency in the matter, and they have absolutely no knowledge about how to like do public service, basically.
Yeah.
And also they were asking in the comments if there is any abolitionist movements. So yes, there is a Lebanese Association for Civil Rights. There's Together Against the Death Penalty and the Beirut Bar Association. So there are lots of lawyers and civil societies working on the matter, but with an absence of state, it's very difficult to move forward with anything. We can see that any investigation is anyway being postponed or not happening. So it's a bit of a tricky situation because we're not operating in a country that operates like any other one easily. So that's to answer that question. So there are abolitionist movements. If the justice system, is not functioning, then that means that there's no rehabilitation, all of these things. Someone asked whether there are minimum standards for the conditions in prisons and what they are. So I'm not sure if you know how to answer, but I think you kind of answered already, but if you want to...
I think when you want to think about the standards for prisons in Lebanon, think the lowest possible, and we're below that. That's how, I mean, there's really no way to describe it. It's absolutely disgusting. You get to the point, just to give you a picture of it, you get to the point where you just get used to eating food with cockroaches sitting next to you. It's just, you know, like that, just to simplify the idea. Yeah, I don't know if you guys have ever seen that, but the point is it's extremely dirty. The water is extremely dirty. It can give you kidney stones. That's how bad it can get if you drink the water from the tap, because some prisoners can't afford to buy bottled water. And I can go on and on to explain it, but take my word for it, the situation is horrible in there. But that's not the issue. That's not the issue. The issue is not how bad the standards are. Prisoners are willing to be in a bad condition, and you can handle it. Any one of you, anyone watching this right now or later, if you ever get to the point where you need to handle prison, you've been put in that situation, believe me, you'll be able to. In the beginning, you might think it's hard. Yes, of course, a lot of things in your mind and in your body are going to have to adapt. But the difficult part is not adapting to your surroundings like that. The difficult part is wasting your time. When these prisoners don't do anything for years and years and years, what they come outside with is a hunger and a vengeance to a certain extent, right? They want to get back at society, get back at the government, and they're completely lost and they don't know what to do. That, I think, is worse when we consider the standards of prisons, that the people that go inside our prisons usually come out much worse than they were when they first went in. So the standards are extremely low. You know, I wanted to add one thing before, and we skipped through it, but I wanted to clarify it now. When people have this this idea that, you know, prisons are controversial, yes, because people are not all progressive. That's why prisons are controversial. If people started thinking a little bit and accepting, I don't think it would be such a controversial topic, because we have beautiful models in countries like Scandinavian countries that have proven to us that If we change the mindset about how we deal with prison systems and how we deal with rehabilitating people in society, guess what? We don't have prisons anymore. They're empty because people stop going to prison. They change the way they act in society. This is a far-fetched thing. It takes a long time to get to there. I'm not saying we're going to turn into Finland or Denmark tomorrow, but you need to start somewhere, and you usually start with a mindset. You say, this is how I'm going to think about it from now on. And for the diaspora that might be listening and following you right now, if they are thinking like this, if they are thinking that the prison systems in Lebanon, oh, it's a taboo, it's controversial, I want them to understand something, and I think this might resonate with all these people. When you look at Lebanon as a country, and I want you to try to imagine that Lebanon is a person, okay? Lebanon made a lot of bad mistakes. The people in Lebanon made a lot of bad mistakes. And yes, at many times they knew better. So they knew not to vote for these politicians. They knew not to do this. They knew not to do that. Or they didn't know. It doesn't matter. What matters is Lebanon got to where it is now. Lebanon now is just as bad as the prisoner in the Lebanese prison, okay, as a standard. So what do? Do we tell Lebanon to go screw itself because now it's a taboo and we don't talk to a failed state? Or do we tell Lebanon, come and let's try to look at your life. Let's try to look at where you screwed up. Let's try to look at how we can improve you so that you can go back to society and you can become a global player again as a country. And I talk the same to prisoners. Never, never, ever tell yourself that because I went to prison, I failed myself or I failed anything, I failed society. Never care about these things. What matters is that we look at prisoners as people that have, at one point in their life, made decisions and they paid the price for these decisions. And now we need to try to help them get on a better track. And that's what the world, that's what Mukhtabin Mujtama'in feels like towards Lebanon, right? You put all of this effort and energy because you believe that Lebanon deserves a better chance and Lebanon can get better if we work properly and change the way we look at it. That's how I look at prison systems. That's how I look at people. It's a huge potential, a huge human resource potential locked in a cage, in a horrible cage, and we don't even talk about them. So, Anna, sometimes in the middle of the night, I'll be sitting and I'll remember them. I know that they're there, you know, and the thing is, when you don't know, you'll never think about them. But I know that they're there and they're in their rooms and they're in their cells and they're going through hell right now.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you want to move on to the third question?
Yeah, it's a lot to process as well, and I'm really, yeah, thank you very much for being open with us about all of this. And then with the dysfunctional state as well, I think it's important for people to understand that we're trying our best to do anything we can to abolish everything and everything that's wrong, but we face a very big wall, and it's very, very difficult to implement any change. So yeah, in that regard, I think the question is, what are the major top 5 challenges facing prisoners in Lebanon from a legal, political, and social lens? I guess it is kind of straightforward that we have a very dysfunctional government. So by default, we think that the legal is that there's no justice in a way. But if you want to elaborate on that, if you have anything to say.
If I want to boil them down to 5 things, I think the first is an independent judiciary. This is very critical. Give the judges the right to work, I guess, more honestly without any political interference. For one, it'll be good for the prisoners in prison, and for two, it'll give more justice to the rest of society, like in the case of the blast. The second would be to do some capacity building in the judiciary itself. Because first of all the files, all the cases, imagine in 2022 are still done by paper and pen. So when you're in a Lebanese courtroom, there's actually a person sitting there, and I can imagine how much this guy hates his life. A person that's sitting there and just writes down the entire back and forth between the judges and the prisoners by paper and pen. And those papers can get lost, those papers can get misplaced, those papers can be thrown away. And that's usually one of the reasons why these things take a very long time. I'm hearing a reverb. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we're hearing the reverb as well, but we can hear you.
Okay. So basically, the thing is that
Do you
is
want
this
to
working?
mute yourself and unmute yourself again?
Let me try. How do I do that?
Oh, we can't hear Melanie. We can't hear you anymore, I think.
No, I muted myself. I have the mute option on my screen, so I wasn't sure if you have it as well. But maybe, Christy, are you on mute as well? Maybe we can mute both of us. I don't know if that will work.
Yeah, we can try.
Okay. All right, that's perfect. So I lost track of where we can. One
You were
of you want to
talking
move it?
about the capacity building for judiciary for better
Capacity, yeah,
reporting.
capacity building. So the thing is that the courtrooms are really slow, the procedures are really slow, and
Christy, are you on mute?
okay. So yeah, capacity building, and basically introducing modern day technology to get things to work faster, decentralize the courtrooms a bit more, maybe scatter them around. I don't know. Again, Anna, I'm not a professional in this background, but I just, get some professionals to work on this. How do we build the capacity to improve it and make it more efficient and faster? So that, if you go into prison for a case that, maximum has 1 year, you don't spend 2 or 3 years waiting for that 1 year. And that's the first, and that's the second thing. The third thing, like we said, is you need to improve how the guards function. Again, are we going to be moving it to another department, or are we just going to keep it with the ISF and improve how they handle the cases? And again, this is very easy. This is very easy. We can just organize therapists, psychologists, maybe some NGOs like Embrace, for example, that would go up and actually do things with these guards. I mean, whether we like it or not, these are the guards that are guarding the prisoners. Whether we like the ISF or we don't like the ISF, we're with the government, against the government, that doesn't matter. What matters is whoever's guarding these prisoners needs to be equipped with the right information, the right procedures, and the right mindset. Number four is also the improvement of the situation inside prison. On an educational level, what are we teaching these prisoners? Emotional intelligence, skills, languages, culture, stress, anger management, dreams. Can we just teach prisoners to dream? Lano, I'll tell you from firsthand experience when I was there, and when I look back, I remember it even more. It was a prison filled with adult children, grown-ass men, but they were children on the inside. They loved playing, they loved running, they loved pranking each other. And that innocence, you would see it in there. Of course, on the outside, you just see a bunch of thugs with tattoos and maybe a golden tooth, or I don't know what people have as a preconception for it. But the point is that inside you'd actually see what's really there, and it's just lost children. They're very confused about life in general. Um, and if you gave them the right direction inside, and maybe with a full procedure, so what do we do with the prisoner when they first arrive? Do we give them a mental check? Do we check their mental health? Do we check how they interact with society? What do we do when they come? What do we do while they're there for their prison sentence? And then what do we do when they're leaving? Do we pass them on to another organization that helps them get a job? Do we force them into some sort of community service? Yani, one of the things that we can do with prisoners, these thousands of prisoners, is we can tell them, why don't they do some community service? We have a lot of things in this country that could be done through that, and they would be paying a sort of payment towards society in some way, I guess. And the fifth and last thing that that you need to improve, I guess, in the entire equation, Yani, is how, again, this is something that I believe, at least, how society looks towards prisoners. So it's not really directly about the prisoners themselves, but it's about how the society looks at prisoners. And that can be done through awareness campaigns. It can be the only access that Lebanese people have to what it's like in prison is usually through those shows that are on TV. There's, I think, one show on NTV and another show on Al Jadid. So any of you international diaspora, you probably don't know these channels and you don't know these shows. But locally, there's about 2 or 3 TV shows that cover prison cases. And usually 99% of the time, they cover the case in a way that makes the prisoner look like a victim of society. And at the same time, it's very I don't know how to explain this to you, but it's mainly for ratings. So they want to get interesting topics and they want to blow it up on TV and reenact the whole situation. They don't really care about making the prisoner connect with the society and the society connect with the prisoner. They would rather that the people watching only see a cool show. So they reenact the story of how he stole the car and how he did that. So people watching are usually telling themselves, oh, this guy, he's a criminal. Oh my God, I can't believe he did this, he did that. Instead, you could organize talks inside prison. Yani you could have 6 or 7 prisoners sitting together debating topics. You could have shows that were done like that. You could have awareness talks where psychologists can go and talk to the people on TV and explain to them what happens when a prisoner gets arrested. What happens to their psyche? What happens when you go inside there for a long period of time? I've met people that have spent 30 years in prison. That is very scary. One of the scariest things I've ever seen in my life is to look inside the eyes of a person that has spent that much time in prison. They have no idea what's going on in the real world outside. The only thing they have to access the real world is TV. That's the only way they know what life is like, and then inside prison, you live inside prison. You live in the world of prison. So these are, I think, the 5 main things that I would suggest. If I want to revise them again really quickly, it's the idea of the judiciary, independent judiciary, capacity building in the different departments of the judiciary. It's about equipping the guards, whoever's guarding the people. It's about educating and figuring out how we want to maximize the potential of the prisoners and rehabilitate them in a different way. And number 5 is how do we make the people more empathetic towards prisoners and more understanding of what's actually happening behind those walls.
Thank you. And with obviously the ultimate goal to become abolitionist, I guess, because the point is to really make sure first and foremost that the government provides the most basic needs and basic services so that we don't even have to come to this point and at the end. And one thing as well that people can do right now, because we're supposed to be having elections, and many do not believe in the elections as a means of change, and it's very valid as well as a concern, but is to ask as well, what are the new parties doing? What are their policies towards marginalized communities? Something that is completely shifted aside. And I mean, understandably so, because of the economic crisis, lack of electricity and services, etc. But it's important as well to obviously remember the importance of the basic human rights and all these marginalized communities. And I have yet to see a political party that's running for the elections addressing all of these issues or having a policy memo on these issues. So I think what is also important at political level is to really advocate for that, because as much as we can do awareness raising and reform as well, the prison system, it's just an underlying issue of like a much larger thing. And but for people who don't understand as well, in the comment section, etc., it's we're operating in a country where it's very different than other countries. We don't have a functioning state, in the sense that it's very difficult to rely on them. And obviously, as much as we want to really accuse them and put pressure on them, we still face a lot of challenges, and obviously we're trying to overcome them. But this is why I guess it sometimes becomes more practical for people to think about practical solutions in the meantime, to address short terms and then to achieve long-term goals, if that makes sense. So yeah, so based on that as well, I mean, what would you say are the main misconceptions about prisoners? and how would you address them? Because you said we need awareness raising campaigns. I think we've kind of answered some of them, but in Lebanon as well, and in the world, like there's no knowledge of the judicial system. People need to be punished if they did wrong, right, and things like that. So this is a traditional thought process. What if you have anything to add, because you might have answered already this question, but if you have any misconceptions to highlight.
No, not really. I mean, we pretty much covered every single misconception that people have about prisons. We pretty much covered, you know, like what actually goes on in there. People, in one of the easiest ways to see what happens in prisons is through Hollywood movies. So usually that's what people think happens in there. To a certain extent, a lot of those things are true. To others, they're not, yani. But again, the most important thing to realize is those people are people. They're human beings, regardless of what, you know, regardless of whether or not you think that you relate to them. You might find yourself in that position one day, and you might yourself become a prisoner, and you might yourself be put in a situation where you now are trying to reach out and tell people, hey, I was a prisoner, but that doesn't mean I'm a bad person. So I think that, you know, that's the main issue. The biggest misconception is that we think they're not people anymore, and they're really still people. They just, you know, they went astray at one point. Not, and the thing is that I don't want to come and, I don't really like to victimize the prisoner. لأنه the thing is that we make these decisions. When I engaged in cannabis, I didn't do it because I didn't know it was illegal. I knew it was illegal. I did it out of conviction. You know, I'm one of the people that actually believes that Lebanon is a country that has tremendous amounts of cannabis and has the potential to capitalize on that, on the skill, on the heritage. I mean, cannabis has been around for a very long time in this country. But still, instead of creating a sector in our economy and maybe working on exporting different products from hemp and cannabis, instead of doing that, what we do is we basically put hundreds and hundreds of families under this label of drug dealers and I don't know what, and really all they're doing is growing cannabis, which is now legal in half the world. And by the way, the largest number of cases in prisons in Lebanon is drug cases, drug-related cases, just to know that as well. So this is a country that has a lot of problems, not just with how the judiciary handles it, but like you said, it has a lot to do with our laws. It has a lot to do with reforming our policies. And it has a lot to do with what happens in parliament. I mean, the parliament, the representatives of the people, how are they going to change these things in parliament? And then how is that going to be reflected in the executive body and the different branches of government? How are we going to do that? But again, at the end of the day, we need to realize something. And you were telling the viewers a minute ago that, you know, Lebanon has its uniqueness in how these things happen. In Lebanon, the prison system is a political card. Okay? The political system is a political card. Sorry, the prison system is a political card. That's why we have never had a general amnesty in a very long time, since the 90s, because there was no necessity. You know, there was no need, because when you have, let's say, around 5,000 or 6,000 prisoners in Lebanon, maybe a bit more, and you have over 100,000 wanted criminals, because people need to remember that when you are a wanted criminal, you are also a prisoner, but you're a prisoner outside, because now you're a fugitive, you can't travel, you can't move. So basically, that's around 110,000 people. And these 110,000 people have families. So usually these families, what they do is they resort to political parties to get help, to ask for an amnesty, afu am in Arabic. And they have been doing that for 30 years. And for 30 years, they have never signed a general amnesty, even though there were so many times where they could have. They could have done those things, but they didn't. Until today, these families, which have organized themselves into movements to try to help their children get out of prison, they have not been able to do anything. They go to the different politicians, they lobby for their kids, but you cannot do anything because the politicians in Lebanon want to keep the status quo. They want to keep those people in prison. They want to keep these people that are wanted around the country unable to get jobs, unable to survive, and to keep the crime in Lebanon up. They don't want to solve the problem. I remember when I first got caught with cannabis, and the detective was asking me all these questions. One of the things I asked them was, you know exactly where all the biggest drug dealers of this country are. You know where they are. You know their homes. You know their names. You know who they're politically affiliated to. You know where we're growing cannabis right now. So why are you interested in me? Why are you not interested in the root of the problem? Why are you interested in an 18, 19-year-old in university that's smoking cannabis? That's the biggest issue we need to deal with in Lebanon? No. So the idea is they want to keep the system alive. They don't want to kill the system, and they benefit a lot from this crime. They benefit a lot from the prison system. They benefit a lot from the wasta. So keeping that in mind, the context of all of that, that's why you're not going to see the system changing anytime soon. So what I would suggest is initiatives that are done either by NGOs or by civil society organizations like yourselves, or by individuals like myself, trying to reach out to some prisoners, trying to help them get back on their feet. You'll be amazed, by the way, when a person is deprived from so much food, water, shelter, all of that, but also love and support, friendship. When people are deprived from all of that, when they get it, they're usually very, very thankful, to say the least, that you're giving it to them, that you're giving them the time to listen to them. So people usually, they think in their mind, oh, I'm never going to talk to a prisoner because they're probably all bullies and all. It's not the truth. The truth is that they're very nice people. They're just people that usually don't get a break in life, and they're labeled all the time. So that's why they stay like that.
Thank you. Yeah, so misconceptions as well is basically because, Christy, can you please mute? Sorry. I think the echo comes from you. Thanks. So yeah, because people also don't know that the government, as you mentioned, is made of warlords in the past who literally passed an amnesty law to be able to move forward in brackets after the Civil War, where they committed so many crimes. So by default, we have the same people in power for 50, 30 years who committed crimes, got away with it, still continue to commit crimes, still getting away with it, have absolutely no independent judiciary, putting pressure on all independent judge, trying to just like we're seeing now with the blast investigation, to protect themselves, basically. So this is why we're in a situation where we kind of feel hopeless but want to change things. It's because we really don't have any functioning system, and it's made of criminals basically that aren't even in prison in a way. And the misconceptions as well is that's why, as you said, there's drug dealers in the prisons, but also someone's asking in the comments if there are political prisoners in Lebanon, and that is also true. I mean, if you do advocate, we've seen many cases in the past month about people getting arrested and being threatened for speaking up against the government. There's like censorship, asking questions. Just literally yesterday it happened to me. I was called a bully for basically asking for accountability from one of the public officials. So this is the perception of public service in Lebanon, is when you question and when you ask something from your public official, you're being a bully, or and as you said, it's basically to maintain the system where it is. It's increasing the gap and power, and it just helps them to keep in power. And now we're facing a huge inflation rate, and that keeps people hungry. So that feeds into political parties paying people or giving them food in return for votes. It's vote buying. So it
Absolutely.
perpetuates the system and maintains the people in power. So yeah, this is the misconceptions. I don't know if you want to elaborate slightly on the political prisoners, and then we can maybe move to the last question that Christy has on what can actually be done.
Leki, Anna, during my time when I was there, I didn't really bump into any political prisoners. Again, the cases that you're talking about are basically a person that got arrested because he put a bad Twitter post about the president, or Shadin, for example, doing something about pads. There we go. I love it. I love this country.
Then you can see electricity cuts in action. We're laughing,
It's
but it's
absolutely
hardcore,
amazing.
so.
It's absolutely amazing. Hold on. All right. We're just going to do this for a second. All right, there we go. Anyway, I'm glad I'm on my phone's internet and not on the
Yeah, I hope that
Wi-Fi.
that's okay as well with you knowing how, yeah.
No, it's fine. It's fine. So basically, when I was there were no political prisoners. I mean, it's not like Syria, for example, where you're either with the regime or against it. In Lebanon, we don't really have because we don't have one regime. Remember that, right? We have 18 sects, 140 political parties, 8th of March, 14th of March. It's a cocktail in Lebanon, so we don't have political cases. But what we do have are you have cases, for example, of people that had worked with Israel, for example, in different things. So they were in prison over there. You had some people, and that was the extent of what I would call maybe a political case. But other than that, no, we didn't. Usually political cases were dealt with before they reached prison. The only case that I ever saw that was half political was Walid Jumblat, one of his right-hand men, which was Bahij Bouhamzi. I remember this case because he had come in while I was there. And it was sort of issue between Bahij and between Walid Jumblat. So Walid Jumblat ended up imprisoning Bahij for embezzling $200 million. But that's it. We don't really have these cases where people get pulled aside because they're against the president and they get beat up and sent to prison for 20 years. This is not Syria. This is Lebanon. Yeah, no, we're cooler over here. We get arrested for marijuana and stealing cars and
And
some
ironically,
sort of
other type of crimes yeah.
But
So
we
anyway.
do have everything else. I mean, we have cybersecurity crimes, we have international fraud crimes. I've actually met, I think, almost every single nationality when I was in prison. There were Filipinos, Bangladeshi people, Russians, Germans, Colombians, Bolivians, Palestinians, Syrians, Americans, French, British. I saw all of them in there. Turkish people. Lebanon is actually Anjad, it's really something. When I look back at that place, the entire country with the foreigners were in that one building. So when I want to look at Lebanon, I just look back at that building and I see a very good example of what's happening in the entire country. Yeah.
Can I unmute myself?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if the problem is from me or not.
There was an echo. So basically, yeah, when someone else speaks, you just need to mute. That's all.
Okay. So we're gonna move on to our last question, and basically the purpose of these talks that we've been doing, and this one is not only to raise awareness and to break the taboo when it comes to marginalized communities and how is the crisis currently affecting them, but it's also to give maybe hope or like tips for people that really want to help and feel helpless and don't know what to do, because it's right, like especially when you're a diaspora, you don't know how you would be able to help because you're not in Lebanon. And even people that are in Lebanon, the subjects that we've been tackling are so big that sometimes we think that we're not able to do anything. So what can people do to help this situation and to improve the situation of prisoners in Lebanon. And you talked about the movements, Melanie talked about the movements as well, but you talked about movements that are headed by the families of prisoners. And maybe this is something that we can tackle, maybe this is something that can like grow bigger in Lebanon, or if you have any other ideas.
Okay, so like I said, it really comes down to the individual initiative at this point. And,
Christine.
we shouldn't be waiting for any government plan or in any in near time. If we want to act, we need to act by ourselves. One of the first things that I think should be done, if let's say tomorrow morning مغتربين مجتمعين decided to tackle this subject and do it, was you need to bring all of the stakeholders together on one table. So we need the families, because the families are a very strong pressure group. They are always willing to protest for their children. They're always willing to be there, present. They're willing to do anything, obviously, to get their children out, or at least to know that their children are on the way to get out, because the way they are now, they feel like their kids are stuck. So the first is the families. The second is the prisoners in prison. I think that through the NGOs that work with these prisoners, we can very easily get some of the key NGOs that work with the prisoners in Lebanon to sit down at a table with us and say, okay, so we have the families now, we have these organizations that work directly with the prisons, and now we need the third part, which is we need access to the government. So we need to talk to the Ministry of Interior, we need to talk to the Ministry of Justice. If you're able to get these four players on one table through representatives or through anyone and work with them, these four players together can improve the way the situation is in prison. Because one, we'd be making sure that the families are constantly working on pressuring the government to keep the program running, because we need to constantly be doing this work. Yani, mafina, let's try to rehabilitate the prison systems for 1 or 2 or 3 months and then give up. No, this is something that needs consistent work. Okay. The second part is the NGOs that are working with them. We need to maybe assist them. Maybe we can give these, maybe members of the diaspora who cannot maybe give money or any other thing could maybe teach. Maybe you can teach people in prison. Maybe the NGOs could organize a way where we can give online classes. Maybe there's a way where we can organize jobs. I mean, who's to say that we can't teach prisoners, I don't know, programming or digital art, and then sell that work as a remote job? Who says we can't outsource jobs to Rumi? No one. You know, if you can outsource your work to someone in India, you can outsource your work to someone in Rumi. So there's many ways where we can change what's happening inside the prison through the NGOs. And then the Ministry of Interior is, like I was saying, we need to equip these people with the skills. How do they deal with prisoners? So we could give them classes, we could teach them, we could organize talks with the ISF members and organizations, like I said, like Embrace and others that are already working on mental health in Lebanon and how to improve the way we deal with that. And on the fourth one, the judiciary. Maybe we can offer them capacity building. I mean, in the last 2 years, I have seen so many organizations like Google, for example, that have offered help to Lebanese organizations in terms of capacity building. Why can't we help the judiciary with that? You know, sometimes, and in a country like Lebanon, this is actually almost all the time, there's too much pride and too much laziness. So they never do anything about it. But if we go to the judiciary and we tell them, guys, we really need to do this. We need to improve the situation. Let's try to integrate to better technology. Stop using pen and paper. Let's improve the process in some way. You know, as the diaspora, we want to help. We want to help with our skills, with our information, with our resources. Maybe we don't want to pay money, but we want to help. And I think that if we're actively working on these four pillars, the prison system will start getting better as soon as we start. Because right now, at this moment, nothing is happening. So even 1% improvement is an improvement.
Thanks. Yeah, just to clarify again as well, I think as much as we provide capacity building, I think the difficulty and the challenge is more about the power of the veto players in public policy, as you mentioned, is
That's
basically,
where the families come in.
yes,
That's why you need
absolutely.
the families. Because the
How,
thing is that the families, sorry, keep going and crying at the politicians' houses. But if you give them a game plan, if you tell them now, instead of going and crying at politicians' houses like you did for the last 30 years, give us your energy. Help us pressure the government to implement our plan. Help us pressure the government to implement this reform plan that we have to improve the prison situation, the judiciary situation, and the ISF situation. You'll find that the parents might actually agree with you. If you listen and you talk to them and you understand them, they might actually agree. Then you have hundreds of thousands of parents and families across the country that might be willing to help pressure this plan into working. And that veto doesn't matter anymore.
well, I guess I mean more about enacting legislations and policies, because everything is stuck in parliament. And as much as there have been pressures to enact changes in laws, they have been always pushed back from the parliament, because we have a religious-based system, and every
Yeah,
sect has their own say. So I think as much as we provide capacity building, etc., what I meant by veto player is that there's 18 of them in parliament
yeah,
almost, and I mean in general, and as you mentioned, they profit a lot from the situation. So that's where the problem is, and I think the difficulty is, and we're talking about a long-term change, because we're facing multidimensional issues. I mean, at this
yeah.
point in Lebanon, it's just a collapse of everything. Having said that, we shouldn't stop advocating. We shouldn't stop raising awareness. We shouldn't stop pressuring. We shouldn't stop shaming and blaming the politicians. We shouldn't stop holding them accountable. Any means that are political, first and foremost, is always more favorable, but obviously as well helping those who are suffering, because ultimately the goal would be to just abolish all of the system, and having new people replacing them in power as well. Um, so yeah, but thank you so much, Ali. This was a really much needed conversation, I think, very rare in Lebanon, I think, and I hope that through these series of talks, we start sitting and talking about everything that's uncomfortable with our country and how to address them.
I really
Christy,
do.
go ahead.
So yeah, I just wanted to thank you, Ali, and thank everyone who has joined us today. I think these talks are now more important than ever, not only because obviously the situation for these marginalized communities have become worse and worse, but also as we're trying to implement change in Lebanon and we're trying to shift the narrative, we have to include everyone in it, and most importantly, these marginalized communities, because if we don't talk about everyone and if we don't include everyone, then the change is not inclusive and it's not complete. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining, and I really hope that you enjoyed tonight's talk. As I said before, it's a part of a series that we've been doing. We've already had talks about migrant domestic workers, sorry, the LGBTQIA community, refugees in Lebanon, and now the situation of prisoners. I want to ask as well, everyone, if you have any ideas about talks that you would want us to organize in terms of marginalized communities or anything that has to do with the theme that we've been tackling. You can always DM us your ideas, and we'll try to include them. As Melanie said as well, these talks will be done in Arabic soon. So every talk that we've had so far will be done again in Arabic. And Ali, we haven't talked about that yet, but if you'd be willing to do it in Arabic, then we'll
Yes,
do
I
it in
will.
Arabic as well.
Certainly.
So yeah, I don't know, Ali, if you want to add something before we end.
Honestly, first of all, I really want to thank you guys for this, not just for inviting me to the show, but for starting these things. These talks are really important. I'm gonna love watching this tomorrow. But the thing is, I really think that one of the most important improvements that we've done in the last 3 years as Lebanese people is the fact that we are talking so much more. We're always trying to find a subject to discuss, something to spread more awareness about, and that's a key. That's what differentiates sleeping societies from societies that are awake and progressing and changing. So really, thank you so much for doing this initiative. And you know, the subjects that you started with are really important. This subject is really important. I'm sure the rest of them are also really important. Um, so I wish you guys the best of luck in doing this. And now I know that we're going to have a part 2 in Arabic. So that's going to be also very good because, like you guys said, it's all about being inclusive right now. Everyone that listens to this information needs to understand it, needs to be able to digest it, and needs to know that we're talking to them. Everyone needs to be a part of these conversations. So really, thank you so much for this. Thank you for the opportunity. And I wish you guys the best of luck. And I'm always here if you guys need anything, again, in these subjects or others.
Thank you so much, Ali. Thank you. And everyone who joined, thank you. And please also reach out if you have any feedback or in general ideas that you want to channel on actions as well, because after talking, we also have to start acting. So everyone reach out if you do have any ideas. And yeah, thank you so much, Ali, once again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.